so much for that great introduction, and also for the other activities that have come before this. I was very moved by the video. I don't know if you guys were moved by that video. Were you guys moved by that video, or did I watch it by myself? You were? Yeah, that is the power of creativity. And so, as you've heard, this is a panel that is full of creative people, people that are doing amazing things in the creative, I don't want to say economy, let me say creative industries. So just to kick this off, because we are, running a bit behind, and I want us to get to the meat of the conversation. I'm a huge believer in starting from a place of joy, because for me, joy is protest. And so I would love for each one of you, as we get into the conversation, first things first, to tell me your favorite moment from the protest. I know there's a lot of terrible things that happened during the protest, but there are also some things that were highlights, that were joyful things. So each one of you to tell me your favorite moment from the protests, and as you're answering that question, also let us know how did you get into the creative space, and what do you feel your contribution towards the protest was? We can start with you, Amadai.
Check 1, 2, hi everyone. It's nice to see all of you here. What am I supposed to start with? I'm sorry.
Favorite moment from the protest, and then how you got involved?
I feel like my favorite moment of the protest is seeing people uniting through music. I felt, some sort of like togetherness, Kenyanness. Music really brought people together. We saw that when, since the first time when people came with speakers, people who are sitting out, or rather standing outside bars, and the DJ would play on Moi Avenue, and I think seeing people uniting for a protest using art, for me, that was amazing. In terms of how I became an artist, I am a writer, podcaster, poet, many things. I've always been a creative. Like, I've always written, I've always performed since I was very, very young. So these days, I always tell people that I was born to do this. I do not do a lot of creative, as much creative work as I should, but I was born to do this, and I love it.
I don't know who else enjoyed the part where when they would use the water cannon, and then the water was pink, and then everybody would go like, "It's a girl!" That was my favorite moment. The second one was also when they threw tear gas, and you go like, "Yay!" Like, at one point, guys decided to just have fun. We're like, "Hey, kama tutakunywa tear gas, might as well enjoy it." And it sort of became a game, to the point where I remember at one point tulikuwa hapo GPO, and they would throw like tear gas canisters, and then we'd throw a ball, and then as they're throwing back the ball, we throw back the tear gas. So nikatuwa nacheza kati, but like hapo wanajua tunacheza kati until like tear gas zirudi. So for me, that was like one of my favorite moments, because I saw that, like, naturally, this was not my first time being in a protest, and naturally the moment tear gas is just lobbed at people, wanakwanga like, time to go home. But this time round, ilikuwa like, hii kitu eventually zitaisha. So ilikuwa cha tuone like how many more can take before they run out. They didn't run out. Unfortunately, they ended up doing other things. But for me, in that moment where it didn't matter, guys were like, we've decided we're going to be here, so no matter what, we're still going to be here. How did I become a creative? Just like Wamadhai, from when I was very young, I used to just do things. My mom calls me Kameme. My job was to tell stories. So stima ilikuwa tu inapotea hivi kwa nyumba. I'm like, hey, entertainment time. So that's how I ended up in all the spaces that I've been in. To how did I find myself in the protests and what contribution? For me, I think I helped mobilize people and shared as much information as I could. I was one of those people to do nakumbuka tukisalimiana. I was collecting numbers and sharing. Well, people were sharing numbers and then I was like, nimezipata ndio hizi. So that was me, and also just mobilizing. And then in the streets, I was sharing information in regards to where to avoid wamejipanga pande gani, so si twende hivi. So I think that was like one of the things that I contributed towards the movement.
Another wants to answer that question. Okay.
Yes, I did answer. Sorry, I have a terrible memory. I did answer the last question on how I contributed to the protest. I helped organize digital security trainings. We saw there was an internet shutdowns, so we're helping with that. We're also helping coordinate statements around the protection of protesters, the protection, the keeping the internet open and all that stuff. As an influencer as well, I led efforts to debunk information. There was a lot of disinformation. So through my organization and personally, I led efforts to debunk propaganda that was being and disinformation that was being shared by the other side. Thanks.
Niaje? Poleni nimeficha also, niko na home and I'm trying to be a responsible citizen. So I have very many favorite moments from the protest, but top of the chart is what I was saying to your Farasi. The guys who went home with the horses, because I have questions. Like, first of all, why do you know how to ride a horse? Number two, how did you get the cops off? Number three, mulikuwa mnapeleka wapi? Right? So it's still, there's that video which is still top of my mind. Like, okay, there are the alternative ways that people contribute. Adi Mapinchi, there was the guy who was pickpocketing the cop and taking the tear gas. It was like you're just using your skills for the betterment of society for once. It's like, so, such, kunaona msele kwa rambuka nayo, right, kwa line ya polisi tu hapo, is like, that's one of the most powerful moments of resistance I've seen. Yeah, so I could keep going on and on about my favorite moments. How I joined the art scene it's very strange actually, because I've been writing since I was a young kid, Miri Mtu Aoja, Miri Mtu Ameru. But how I got into the space, I came from high school coming to Nairobi, and in my possession was some newspaper cuttings, and there were poets. There was a center spread with a bunch of poets. When I came across it, I was like, "Aya, watu wanafanya hiki kitu na wako huko nje si ya kutumia tu wasichana." And some of the people on those cuttings were Mwende and Wamadhai. So about 12, 13 years ago, I don't know if Wamadhai remembers this, but I sent a tweet being like, "Mtu akitaka kuanza poetry anaendanga wapi?" It was like, there's a place called Slum Africa, Westlands, Nini. So I joined the active creative space, partly thanks to the people sitting on stage with me, and I'm very grateful. How I contributed to the movement, mostly through my poetry, and I also do a lot of work in history, so articulating and trying to connect what we're doing now with the past. This is not the first time this is happening. 100 years ago, Muthoni Nyanjiro led 8,000 people to try and free Halitoko outside Central Police Station. So we've had people do this over and over and over, so trying to connect that through stories. But eventually, I guess, the one that stood out was kupeleka mkokoteni hapo nje ya parliament and getting arrested for it.
Hey everyone, hata sikuwa najua kuna mic inside. Okay. Are we introducing this one? Okay. My favorite model. Okay. This might sound a bit juvenile, but there's something about this whole the protest that felt really high school. Yeah, si ndio? Hiyo kimbia, polisi wako hii side, tukimbia hii side. You know, the last time I felt that was in high school. Mimi niko high school walikuwa wanagoma sana. Okay, nilikuwa Alliance. I'm kidding, if I was in Alliance, ningekuwa mshajua nikipanda hapa. It could have been in my bio. But anyway, the whole protest thing, siati sikuwa na kazi, nilikuwa naenda Migongo because of the excitement. But seeing people come together for that beautiful cause was really amazing. And also the other thing that I found really amazing and beautiful about the whole Maandamano thing is specific communities coming together to contribute to the cause, like the tech community coming together, and I keep saying this over and over, the tech community coming together and looking for new ways to disseminate information, the doctors coming together and forming an association wakituambia, kama kuna protest kesho, we'll have our booth in a certain point, so that when you're injured, you're gonna be treated for free. Seeing even the PR, communications, influencers, and all that family coming together and assisting in whatever way they can, and every other specific group of people that came together to contribute to the cause. It was very beautiful and amazing. How I became a creative. Nisijui kama niko na story since I was a kid. Nisijui angake. Anyway, I think I've always been a creative. Sababu nilikuwa naenda church. I used to go to church with my mom. Tunakaa huko nyuma, and I used to enjoy praise and worship. Even when my mom used to take me to chamas with her, and wamama wanasema wacha tusimame tuongoze ka chorus, my mom would look at me like wacha kama Isaya hapa atatuongoza na damu ya Yesu. Yeah, and singers are creatives, right? Yeah, so I've been a creative like since, plus I was in the drama festivals in primary school and also in high school. But I guess you're asking how now I became now an influencer. I started doing comedy skits. So if you're not busy, you can go check out my videos on social media. I do short comedy skits. Yeah, and I'm a creative, an influencer. How I contributed to the protests. Also, another beautiful thing that was really birthed out of the finance bill protest was civic rights. A few months ago, if you told me I would be in a panel talking about things to do with politics and everything, ningecheka tu nikwambie it's a lie. But anyway, one of the most beautiful things that I think was birthed from this protest in Maandamano was civic rights. We were able to translate the finance bill in different Kenyan languages, 17 I think to be specific, including sign language there will be 18. Wow. So yeah, and we're looking to do more and more stuff, translating other bills and other policies. Yeah, so that's basically it.
What is it? How I became an activist. I became an activist, what she said when she was introducing me. It was in a response to extrajudicial killings happening in poor neighborhoods. And beyond that, what was my favorite moment? My favorite moment, I think, was seeing grown-ass adults playing Bano in the middle of the streets. And also, the other fun moment was seeing, because we organize many protests, but usually it's 50 people, 100 people turning up. But now seeing so many different people from different sections of society coming to the protest, that was a big thank you to everyone who showed up. So I think the third thing that was favorite thing for me was the showing up, that people showed up. When we called for it, people showed up. I think that was really, really great for me. In terms of contribution in the protest, I'm not sure I can say everything I did. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say everything I did. But in short, I can say that I was a supplier. I supplied all the supplies you guys were using during the protest. We were doing the supplying and the distribution and all kind of things.
Fantastic. So like I said, this is a very, very powerful panel. I just wanted you guys to hear who's on this stage. So now we can get into the next question, which is really the point of this panel. When it comes to media. Media here also, legacy media, but also social media, where a lot of us tend to be. What do you think the role of media is in terms of youth empowerment and also in terms of youth representation? Anyone can take that question. We don't need to go in a line. Okay.
Is it in the context of the protest? In the context of the protest?
Yes, in the context of the protest, yes, but also just generally.
Media exists in the context of the country, in the context of where they operate from, and in this context is rather, as we're speaking about Kenya, and media should be at the forefront of not only informing, but trying to sort of like link the pieces and making sure that everyone is heard, especially marginalized voices. Journalists are taught to give two sides of the story. As far as their training is concerned, they are taught to give two sides to a story. But I've noticed, especially when it's contentious things, when it's things surrounding government, or like oppressors, the oppressed and the oppressors, they tend to give a lot of coverage and mileage to oppressors. And I feel like media in Kenya should evolve and focus on telling the truth. Not both sides of the story, three sides of the story, focus on the truth. Sometimes the truth is only on one side. For instance, when during the protest, the media were witnesses to crimes against humanity. In that particular instance, there is no need to have representatives from the police coming to defend the police. There is absolutely no need. Those voices are not necessary, because we saw on live TV the police shooting protesters. The only thing we need to hear about is from the DPP, the prosecutors, IPOA, and other people who work in that space, how those police officers are going to prison. End of story. So for me, I feel like in the context of that, media is letting, or rather, let down the country because of that, like focusing too much on the oppressor and not and not the oppressed. I feel like when media now started getting targeted, when I say that is that journalists started getting shot, is when they started changing. Even you could see some of their headlines were 5 protesters shot, 6 injured. But shot by who? These guns how do I put it? They have to be operated by someone. So who was doing it? But after I saw at the Nane March, that was last week, the journalists were being targeted. They were shot with tear gas canisters. Now they dropped that passive voice, and now they are focusing on police disrupted the protest. And I feel like, to be honest, I'm not saying the media should attack anyone, but they need to report the truth, and they should stop, my opinion, employing passive voice when it's obvious what is happening, and using words like allegedly, when they have witnessed whatever it is. They have camera footage, they have pictures and all that stuff. So yeah.
Thank you for that. So I'd love to hear from you, Muthoni, and then Gatia, on specifically now how the representation of the youth is in the media, especially with regards to how these protests were framed as the Gen Z protests, as opposed to Kenyan protests.
One of the things that really stood out to me was the language that they kept using. It really stood out because I would read their headlines and then I'd get really angry, because I'd be like, why would you even think that that's something you say as someone who's supposed to just report what's happening? Even like the idea of the Gen Z protest, they started it. It was meant to minimize what the movement was doing. It was meant to minimize the protest. And as that kept morphing and changing, and it's like, oh, Gen Z movement, they'd come to the streets and they'd see, at one point, you had grandmothers, and we saw shoshos running. There were shoshos who went to parliament in the morning, and they were tear gassed, right? So it was a Kenyan movement, and their language never shifted from how it started. You see, like, when you think about the protest, there was a shift. Every time something was happening, there was a shift. But they kept that narrative from the beginning. I don't know if it's because they were paid, because there were also rumors that people were called to State House, Agado, and then even that idea of stop live broadcasting. But then it was like, we are going to stop live broadcasts. But bado unaenda ku live broadcast CSS wakikuwa sworn in. So it was very specific. You could tell they were being used. They were being used for propaganda. So it's very unfortunate. And even when they have young people, they put young people there in terms of, it's like a token. It's like, hey, see, your friends are here. It's not because you put them there to listen. You don't care for their opinions. You just want to be able to say, but our group has young people. I would like to equate that to the way we have women reps in the National Assembly. It's so that when they pass BS things, they can say, hey, but the women were in the room when this was happening. It's not because you're putting them there to listen to what they have to offer. It's because you want to be able to get away with things by saying they were in the room. So I feel like within the protest, I agree with them. Like the media really failed. They failed the Kenyan people. And it's funny that when now they became targets, then suddenly they're like, hey guys, fight with us. Even when they protested, I was very pissed off by their hashtags. When they said, we are not criminals, who are? Who are the criminals? Because then are you suggesting that the other people who went to the streets before you were criminals? Because we are not criminals as well, but just, you can say what you are, as you're saying we are peaceful, right? You could have also just said, hey, we are the media. Why did you have to say we are not criminals? The language is very telling. You're trying to tell the oppressor, it's like atuko na wale, you get, it's like they wanted their own kabox. And even Nane Nane, I was laughing when I'd see, I was watching like some live feeds, and I would see, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe wametupia tear gas watu wa media. I'm like, walikuwa tupie kina nani? Because it's like, si hata yuko kwa street, kati ya gas inatupwa kwa street, na uko kwa street, si hata utasafa. But then it's like, and even another thing, they kept following the police. Media was standing behind cops. They were recording from the side of the cops. They weren't in where we were dancing with music, they weren't there. They weren't recording that. Where people were playing Banu, they weren't recording that. It's the independent media that was mostly capturing those moments. It was young people with their phones. And one of the things that I really loved about this is that basically everyone decided to become a journalist. You pull out your phone, you see something, you record it, you share it. So we have so many moments where we can say, actually that's not true, I have a video. And for me, I'm like, everywhere we go, everyone is now a journalist. As long as you have your phone, you've been dubbed. I've knighted you as a journalist to do the work.
Okay, so Gatia, maybe you can just follow up on what Muthoni has said, because I was going to ask that as the next question. In terms of, we're looking at this protests have definitely kind of shifted what media could look like, the media landscape, in terms of the fact that a lot of the information that was coming out of the protest was actually from the people. At some point, I think I got most of the information from TikTok. I was literally going on TikTok to see what is actually happening, which was a very interesting thing. So yeah, so what do you think in terms of what is then the role of the new media, and is that something that we need to get used to, or do we need to do two things at the same time, hold traditional media accountable and say, hey, we actually need this because it's important for the nation, but also at the same time realize that now we have this other whole animal that is new media?
Well, the animal is us. So first of all, I think we need to grow what we have now as traditional media watches and learns what they should have been and should be the entire time, because they are part of the people, and the point of having the media amidst us is to report to us about us. It's not, they're for the state for a reason. It's not to hold court for the powers that be. And if you treat people a certain way, then eventually they learn and figure out a way out of it. So once the people realize our stories are not being centered, the truth is not being transmitted as it should be, these stories are not being reported from our perspective. So people took charge, and people have been doing that in other pockets, Kunda content, so it's just employing the same skills onto the moment. And I'll just connect to the previous question as I go into this. The role, one of the roles of the media is setting the agenda. When they decide on what we talk about, you have over 60 people killed by the police, but then if we decide what we're going to talk about is Jimmy Wanjigi, then what we're going to talk about is Jimmy Wanjigi. However, at the same time, when all that is happening, there are all these people online on a daily basis who are committed to us not forgetting Denzel Omondi and Credo Yaro and everyone who's been killed by the police in this conversation, or even just that phrase, killed by the police. Because then we need to talk about that, and we need to dissect that and know what it means for us going forward. What the people have done is center ourselves in our own story, which is something the media has failed to do, because I don't know if they've forgotten the power they hold or are afraid of that power. But going forward, we can't leave institutions behind, since they've already been invested in, and we have all these professionals who are part of them and who are trained to do the job. So I think what we have in front of us is an opportunity to link the two, and really the onus is on them. The onus is on these institutions to join the people in the path that they've chosen. It's for them to decide on which side of history they need to be on. I mentioned earlier I work with history, and it's unfortunate that when we're doing research, media reports, so the Macmillan Library has newspapers going all the way back to the 1900s. And it's unfortunate that when you're looking at those reports, they're the ones you have to read with a sprinkle of salt. It's not even a pinch of salt, it's like a fistful of salt. Because you look at what the media is reporting today, and you're like, okay, so if they've labeled this the Gen Z protest, and Gen Z should get their flowers for their contributions, but at the same time, they're not the only people who are out in the streets. It's Kenyans, and the issues were for Kenyans. And if the president, say, called us treasonous criminals or whatever, and the media picks that up, then how is it going to reflect 50 years down the line? I read newspapers from the 1950s, and more freedom fighters were being called terrorists. At some point, that term had to change to freedom fighters, but that's after they'd fought for a very long time. But an agenda was set then, and there's an entire section of the world that still remembers them as terrorists. So we have a duty as the people to continue on the path we have picked up. We picked up those cameras, we sent out those tweets, we made those TikToks. We can't stop now. Mike is here. He can't go back to not having civic rights. That's a conversation that needs to keep happening. We can't go back to not debunking the stories that are being put out. We can't go back to seeing bills pass and we don't interrogate them. That's the work the media should have been doing all along, all that research and all that work. That was their responsibility, but now we're here, and theirs is to catch up.
Thank you so much for that. Mike, since you've been mentioned and I was coming to you, the work that you're doing with Civic Rights of translating the bills, and you had started with first the finance bill in different languages. At first it was, which I thought was really amazing, it was basically crowdfunded, where you were asking people to, whatever language you can speak, just try and translate and send me the video. How is it going, and what are your thoughts in terms of when we talk about the future of media, and how really the traditional sense of media has always kind of been like separate from the people, and then this is sort of like a crowd-funded initiative where the people are creating the media. Do you think that this is basically going to be the norm?
Was I supposed to do? Okay. I think people should have eaten lunch jioni. Watu wameboeka bana. But anyway, yeah. So it was interesting because people were even coming forward and saying, I speak Luya, I will translate the finance bill into Luya. It was basically done by volunteers who were saying, I speak Kimeru, so I'm going to translate the finance bill in Kimeru. So that's how we were able to translate it into other many languages. And we're looking to translate, as I said before, we're looking to translate it into we're looking to translate policies and bills into Kenyan languages in the future. But now in regards to the question you asked about the media, I'm going to tie it together with creatives. I think currently, creatives and the media have the responsibility to sustain the momentum, because the fire has kind of gone down, because you can't compare the atmosphere now and how the atmosphere was back in June. And I think currently the responsibility to maintain the momentum is through media and creatives. Because when you mention media and creatives, what comes to mind is content and releasing information that is consumed by people, by Kenyans. So I think to sustain the momentum, the greatest responsibility majorly lies on the media and creatives. And at the beginning of the protests, we kind of thought the media was on our side, until whatever happened, because they were reporting things as they were. And then we don't know where things took a turn, and they suddenly started saying alleged. You're behind a police officer shooting a protester, and then unakuja kwa TV unasema allegedly. What do you mean allegedly? We are seeing on TV ameshoot allegedly changed its meaning. And also I think through media and through creatives, the youth in Kenya have representation. I don't know how many of you know that the youths have been denied representation since 2019. Because representation in the Kenyan government is through the National Youth Council, which hasn't held its elections since 2019, despite a budget being set aside for it every single year. The last time the National Youth Council, which answers directly to the president, had leaders was back in 2019. And every year, 2019, 2020, up to today, 2024, there has been a separate budget for elections of leaders in the National Youth Council, which is supposed to be conducted by the Attorney General. It hasn't been done. Actually, a few months ago, I think it was during the protest, one lawyer protested that issue in court, and I think it's still an ongoing case. But nataka mjue hatuna representation in the government. And another form of representation we have is through the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, whose budget has also been cut by half. Not even by half, by 55%. I was reading an article by Nation that in 2016, the Youth Enterprise Development Fund was given 225 million, and at the end of that financial year, they could not account for 180 million. Hiyo ni 3/4 ya pesa zote. Mnaget? Like, this government has no regard for the youth in any way. So I think through the media and through the creatives, we have major representation. And it's so funny because per the last census that were held, at least zenye nimesoma kwa internet, 47.6 million of Kenyans are the youth, people below 35 years of age. 80% exactly, 80%. You're 20%, and 65, I think, is it 65? 55 years and above are just 1.9 million, and out your majority wako kwa gava. The youth should realize we have so much power. There is power in numbers, and we make 80% of the population. Wachata nisiongea.
So for you, Gibson, I really want to know, because you are activist and you're running and you're part of an independent media outfit. What it's like running independent media, and we're getting into market territory a little bit. You don't have to tell us anything we don't need to know, but just that people, in terms of the way media runs. We have to kind of be honest that media is it's a difficult business, because I don't know, for you guys who maybe don't know, the way in which media makes money is through sponsored ads. So that's advertising, whether it's through brands or the government. Like in Kenya, the government is a huge advertiser and uses that to beat the media. And of course there's subscriptions, but in Kenya subscriptions are not really big. I think Nation had tried subscriptions, Business Daily, I think that's about it. Is there anyone else that has not really? But yeah, so it's like subscriptions and sponsored ads and then grants. So that's why some people were being accused of being funded by Ford Foundation. Some of those were like media outfits. And so it's it's a hard business. So running an independent media platform that is, not really the mainstream, what are the challenges, especially when you are working in the space of human rights?
First of all, so I work for Sema Ukweli as the programs manager, and Sema Ukweli is a justice and human rights media organization. So we strive to tell stories of the most vulnerable, people from the grassroots, where the news and the cases and the issues that they are facing are not being covered by the media. Let me start by the first questions you asked across there. First of all, media should not have a price. You cannot one day be with us reporting the truth, the next day you go to State House and then you change the narrative that you are using before. Media should not be traitors. Media should not be collaborators and enablers of the oppressor. I think that's the bare minimum of what the media should do or should behave. We can no longer trust mainstream media in Kenya. And this is very sad because a large portion of our population doesn't take their news or get their news from Twitter like majority of us. There is a section of our population that only relies on mainstream media. All the truths they know about the world, about reality, is from the mainstream media. So if the mainstream media is misleading people, then you have a whole population being misled and being pacified and being taken around different corners. I think journalism should be a calling and should not be there for profit. And in that way we can be able to get rid of this kind of things that we are seeing with the mainstream media, like passive narratives that are meant to stop you from continuing in the path that you are on. That was the right path, that was the path of light. I was told that it's no longer Gen Z, it's Gen Zote. that it's an ideology. It's about good governance. It's about having a government that is responsible for the people. It's a government that is pro-people and not pro-for-profit. Alternative media. We have to look at alternative media going forward because we have to rethink alternative media and we have to rethink media in general, because I think it's very difficult for you to have a media house that is based on capitalists' ideas to be a people's media outlet. These people, when push comes to shove, they will always choose money. They will always choose the brown envelope. So how can we collectively come up with new ways of sharing ideas, of sharing information, of sharing knowledge without these mainstream media that are based or started for in pursuit of profit or in pursuit of making money? Yeah, I think that was the last point.
Yeah, you can add, and then from you, I know Wamada is burning to say something, and then I'm going to ask the last question.
He said something about some people relying on traditional media to receive information, and I think that's the biggest percentage of Kenyans. People who rely on TV, radio to get information, and I don't think people realize how much power the media has. And I realized it when I went for a funeral. I was going for my uncle's funeral. I'm waiting for someone to say my condolences. Okay. Yeah, I was waiting for waiting. I was attending a relative's funeral, and then I was having a discussion with my aunts. You know, walikuwa wameniona Citizen. Oh, Gen Z wa family, Gen Z ndio huyu Gen Z. I was by the Gen Z media, hapa kuna media. This thing has grown beyond a certain generation. It's grown beyond, the movement has grown beyond Gen Z. It's now, as he said, Gen Zote. So there's this member of parliament, I don't know if his name is Kagombe. Kagombe. Yeah. Oh, you're allowed to mention it. Anyway, these are facts. He said that the movement is being funded by the Illuminati. And you'd listen to it and you'd think, hakuna mtu ataamini hiyo. Let me tell you, my aunts were asking me kama I'm one of the people who are being funded by Illuminati. That's how powerful the media is. Because they showed it on TV and they were telling me, si tuliona Citizen. Si tuliona Citizen wakisema mnakuwa funded by the Illuminati. And that's the power that media has. And I think we live in Nairobi, we are so blinded by everything that happens outside Nairobi. And let me speak as an influencer, as a social media influencer who is mostly active on Twitter. I thought to some point that the movement started on Twitter and has been majorly influenced by Twitter. But then we are slowly realizing that TikTok also has been quite monumental. It has been quite a big platform and a big contributor to whatever that has happened so far. And it's so interesting because who would have thought that TikTok would take such a political shift? And TikTok is also, I almost said TikTok, is also part of the media. So yeah, that's the power that media holds. So, and the sooner we realize it, the sooner we behave accordingly.
Okay, so just because I'd like us to wind up because of time, Wamada, I know you want to add, but I'll just ask the final question. We've all said something very important. I think Mike, you said it last, in terms of we all have a responsibility. Clearly, there's a lot of influence online. And one of the things that's missing, and which is the question I want to ask, is that when we look at some of the conversations, there's so much happening, it's easy to kind of get lost. If you look at platforms like Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, yes, you can search with the hashtags and all that, but really it's like if you didn't get the content while it was hot, it's basically over. And it's one of the things that I really would want us to have a small conversation about is what next in terms of what is our role as media, as influencers, as creatives, in terms of holding memory, in terms of being, the ones to keep the story intact for ourselves, because a lot of people have already forgotten what happened. Some people I saw online saying the thing started on 25th, and I'm like, you guys, we're in August. How have you forgotten something that started in June? It started in June. June 17th was the first protest. How are you already forgetting? You know, what is our job as people that create content, as people that are, you know, journalists or in media, to keep that memory intact for ourselves and for future generations?
I just wanted to add something on old media. For a long time in this country, old media has moved, you know, to the other side. And I'm not talking about journalists, I'm talking about the owners of the media. They've aligned themselves after the second liberation to the other side, to the oppressors. And I feel like this is something that there's a shift, there's an obvious shift, and what the shift that has happened is tech-enabled. So basically, a lot of media now that is independent, citizen-led, etc., is tech-enabled. So this is your WhatsApp, your TikTok, your blogs, whatever. And I think what we need to do, what we need to advocate for personally and in spaces that you're in, is to make sure that the internet is accessible to everyone, and devices are at a cost that a lot of people can be able to afford, and the actual access, the bundles that we buy, the Wi-Fi, etc., should also be accessible. Because I feel, as we are speaking about media, I feel like the journalists are fine, but the owners of the platform always find a way to mess up the reporting, and it ends up focusing on things that it should not be focusing on. So I think that is homework from me to every one of us here.
I was just about to cut you short. Yeah, please answer the last question.
Okay.
So we can wind up on
Okay.
like what do you think we can do in terms of memory keeping, curation, archiving, etc.
So the biggest, I think, as a creative in this time, I think this is the best time to be creative, work your craft, archive. Tell all these stories. It doesn't matter whether it's a video on TikTok, it doesn't, a poem. We need poetry shows about the protest. We need books, we need films, we need documentaries, exhibitions like the one that was by Waria and Power 254. We need all of that. We need all of our creatives to go back to the drawing board, and I need theater. We need to make sure that whatever happened this year will never, ever, ever be forgotten.
I agree with that, and I think the other thing we need to do is document. It doesn't matter what it is. When you see something, record it. You might not think it's important in the moment, but it might be of importance with time. When you talk to people who are mainly getting the information from mainstream media, correct the misinformation, guide them on the path and tell them, actually that's not true. This is why we went to the streets. Hatukuenda juu tulikuwa funded by Illuminati. It's because we are tired. It's because me personally I'm tired of ABC. And I think we also just need to hold space for each other and just keep supporting, because one thing I know for sure is as a movement grows, you will lose some people. People will be bought off. We've seen that happen where one time someone's with us, kidogo sijui kuna space na nani wako huko ndani. So we have to keep the fight alive. The story can't end here. We've lost too many souls to let their story end with, hey, at least we tried. That can't be how we end that story. The story has to end with, we tried and we conquered, and we are grateful that people ended up sacrificing their lives, and because of that, or after that, we kept going. So we can't stop at this point.
The responsibility of archiving and telling these stories does fall a lot on creatives and academics and all that. However, I switch over here to the people who actually hold the history are the people. So, sisi wote tuko na responsibility ya just keeping the story alive. One of the biggest, most powerful tools we have as a society is gossip. Umbea, like mushene. All the channels that gossip goes through, that's where we need to keep these stories alive. Story kichenji huko chini tunasema hapana. In fact, actually, Illuminati hii ni story wametuletea wenyewe. There are the things we hold zenye zinaenda into exhibition and all that, but home pia. Kama ulikuwa na t-shirt ulikuwa unatokea nao maandamano, isikuwe ya kulala, iweke. You're gonna have to explain it to your kids. Kama ulikuwa na placard, usiwashe nayo moto, iweke. At some point that story will be relevant. And strong in the son of what they said, what I'm gonna do is mention names when it comes back to creative. Bano, your album tupe mori. Tunahitaji hizi vitu zikuwa documented. Mudhoni ya hapa, the YouTube videos, Wamadaya you run a vlog. When then, hiyo kitabu, me I'll follow up, and me I'll show up with a show on stage. Like we all need to do this together. Venye tu tulitokea pamoja, hivyo ndo tutazidi pamoja.
I agree with Ngatia. Anyway, I agree with Ngatia that it's a collective responsibility to keep it alive, to document everything, do what you can in whatever in your capacity. I wanted to say something. I really had a point. Yeah? I think imeenda. But yay, Nani must go.
Hivyo amesema. To finish up, there is a job for everyone in the movement, in the struggle, in the uprising that we are experiencing. You may not be able to come to the streets to run around for one or the other reason, but it doesn't mean that your contribution to the movement is invalid. So you should support us or support whatever is happening in any way that you can. I also want to say something serious. People died, so this is not a joke. So if you supported this protest, if you tweeted for people to go out on the streets, if you participated in the protest, then you're not allowed to vote for someone because he mtu wetu. You're also not allowed to vote for someone because he gave you 200. That blood will be on you. So kila mtu atipanga vile anafaa kujipanga, hakuna vile tutafika hapo mbele tena mwanze kubadilisha njia. Kama ulikuwa na support progress, kama ulikuwa na support protest, pia kura, ukipiga kura yako, upige na akili. Lakini hiyo ni kuongelea mambo ya 2027 na sifikiri tutafika 2027 before the liberation. So the next wave of protest should be daily. Wakifunga barabara, tunakaa nyumbani, hatuna shida. We've still achieved everything we wanted because CBD is empty. Wakiona nikaa tuko na jokes, wakoza kufunga barabara, tunaingia CBD. But we have to do it. But this time round, we have to do it daily. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Before your Monday ingine, tutakuwa na president mwingine.
Thank you so much. So I just want to close this. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys for being a great audience. I know it's taken a lot of your time, but thank you for being here. What I want to just say is that honestly, I am so proud of the young people of Kenya. It has been incredible just being, I've never been this patriotic in my life. I bought the flag, I bought the wristband. I actually felt like, wow, I'm so proud of being Kenyan. and even the idea of, you know, the whole concept of Kenya ni home, of knowing that, you know what, we actually care about our country. We want our country to be great. While people are flexing that they're going abroad or flexing that they're wearing foreign brands, we want to flex on our country, that our country is amazing, that the people are amazing, that the young people of this country have so much to offer, and, you know, we want to grow our country. And so I'm really, really proud. Like, I've never been so proud to be Kenyan, and so proud of young Kenyans. Thank you so much for your time. Stick around for the next panel. The conversations keep going.